Thank you. Thank you for joining our webinar today on adverse events reporting. We'll go ahead and start with complaints and recalls. I want to understand what complaints and recalls are. A complaint is a statement from a customer that is expressing dissatisfaction with the manufactured product that they have received. It's an account of something that went wrong with the product, or it is a statement of discontent with the manufacturer. So it can be something that went wrong with the product or something that the customer is dissatisfied that has to do with the manufacturer. So you have complaints concerning the service. You have complaints concerning the packaging of the product, the usability of the product, or sometimes the product is received damaged. And so, of course, a customer would make a complaint about that. A recall, on the other hand, is an action that is actually taken by the manufacturer in order to remove that product from distribution or from sale. It's typically going to be a corrective action that is the result of an investigation into the safety, the efficacy, or the quality of their product. So you may have things that had pharmaceutical drugs that have been banned under the provisions of Drugs and Cosmetics Act. You may have drugs where their product licenses or other types of products, such as medical devices, or biologics that have been, their licenses have been suspended or canceled. Or, of course, you could have an adverse event reported concerning the product that would then cause the manufacturer to recall that product due to safety, efficacy, or the quality of the product. You can also have products recalled because they have already been distributed or they've already been sold. You can also have a total ban or a permanent removal of the product. A lot of times when you have recalls, they are temporary. They're a temporary ban or a temporary removal of that product from sale or distribution. It can be permanent. So then what is an adverse event? Because we said an adverse event can lead to a product, a pharmaceutical drug, medical device, or some type of biologic being recalled. An adverse event is considered an injury that is resulting from medical intervention that's been related to this drug product. It includes medication errors, adverse drug reactions to medications, allergic reactions. It also includes overdoses. So adverse events, they can happen anywhere. Not only do they happen in hospitals, but they can happen in long-term care facilities. They can also happen in outpatient settings. You know, when you're at home taking medication, and of course, you could have an allergic reaction or some type of reaction or event with the drug product in your own home. And of course, we always have to look at overdoses. So these things can take place outside of the hospital setting. They can even take place in a doctor's office. There are requirements for handling complaints and adverse events that we have to follow in our manufacturing industries. We always, for drugs, biologics, and medical devices, we have to have a system set up to handle complaints. So first thing that we have to have in order to handle complaints is there has to be an SOP written, a standard operating procedure that needs to be written. It has to provide complete details on how your facility, your manufacturing facility is going to handle complaints. There has to be records for closed complaints that have to be maintained. So once you have an SOP in place and then you have received complaints, you also have to have keep a record of these complaints. And any of the complaints that have been closed out, you still have to maintain those records. Another requirement is that there is a designee that has to be appointed to handle complaints, and this designee has to have a supporting staff. Now, the designee should be from the quality management unit. They're going to have the necessary knowledge and experience from quality assurance to be able to handle complaints and to handle complaint investigations. If it is suspected that a product within a batch or other batches of the product, if that complaint has to do with a product, that is within a batch or that is within other batches of this product, then it's going to have to be investigated, because you have to determine if these other batches are affected as well. You have to have records of all the decisions that are made as a result of the complaint. You have to be sure that you record them and reference to the corresponding batch record. The manufacturer has to also maintain a file for these drug product complaints. All written records that involve drug product complaints have to be maintained for at least 1 year after the expiration date of the product or 1 year after the complaint was received. And this is going to be whichever time period is longer, the expiration date of the product or the year after the complaint was received. Whichever is longer, you're going to have to maintain those records. For OTC drugs or over-the-counter drugs, some of these do not have given expiration dates, so you still have to maintain the record of that complaint. So what you're going to have to do is maintain that record for 3 years after distribution of the product. If anything does not have an given expiration date, 3 years after distribution is how long you're going to maintain that complaint. Your complaints also have to be reviewed on a regular basis, because you're looking for any types of reoccurring problems that would require attention. You're also looking for anything that might institute a possible recall. All of your decisions that are made as a result of your complaint have to be recorded, they have to be documented, and of course you also have to reference these in the corresponding batch records. A trend analysis should also be performed to identify possible reoccurrences, anything that might lead to a negative on the product. So you're going to need to trend your complaint into a trend analysis on any types of reoccurrences. A lot of times we get complaints because of defects. So there are also classifications for defects. And these are defects, obviously, that were unknown when the product was distributed. Now, these defects could have occurred during shipping. They could have occurred after, of course, the product was released for distribution. There are 3 classes of defects that they're required to be recorded as either critical, major, or other. So for your critical defects, these are going to be defects that can be life-threatening. They require a manufacturer to take immediate action because this product is actually has been life-threatening to someone. And this product could have been labeled with the incorrect name, so there could be a labeling problem, and of course that's going to occur before the product was shipped. It may not have been detected by any types of quality assurance review. There could be deliberately tampered product on the shelf. And we've seen this in history, that products have been tampered with and they have caused death to people, customers. So you would definitely have to recall that product immediately, or the manufacturer would have to take immediate action. There could also be something like microbiological contamination of a sterile product, even though we, do sterility testing. Sometimes, everything may not be detected, or this could have occurred in the shipping. Maybe the temperature for the shipping of the product was too warm. Something happened to violate the sterility of that product. So those would be classified as critical defects because they're actually life-threatening to the consumer. Major defects are defects that would put the consumer at risk, but they're not necessarily life-threatening. They do require a batch recall or a product withdrawal as well. So the critical and the major are going to require recalls or withdrawals of that product from distribution. The critical are going to be life-threatening. The major are going to put the consumer, the customer at risk, but they're not going to be life-threatening. This too could be some type of mislabeling. It could be a non-compliance to specifications. Other defects that present a minor risk could be a batch recall or a product withdrawal. Other defects can be minor, and these would be things that might cause, the product may be damp inside, something that might cause concern to the consumer or affect the consumer, but it's not going to be life-threatening. So what you would do is the batch would be recalled, or the product, of course, would be withdrawn within a few days. And things like this could be product closure faults, like the bottle, say, on a bottle of over-the-counter ibuprofen or something like that is not closing. So that could be a type of defect. Again, anything that is causing spoilage within the product would be another defect. So these are defects that are presenting minor risk. Your critical and your major are considered to be critical is going to be life-threatening. The major is going to put the customer at risk, but not life-threatening. And then your others are minor risk to the consumer. Now, one thing that you're going to need to have in place with your SOP is a form for reporting and documenting product complaints. This is a sample of a form. Of course, you can have your own forms to accommodate your particular facility and your particular products. But one thing that you do, I put this one up here because it does capture the correct information that's needed. Obviously, always the product name is needed, the complaint category, whether it is a major or critical or other complaint. The information as far as the batch number, you are going to need to record the manufacturing date and also the expiration date of that product. You want to be sure that you are getting the name and the address of the person making the complaint, and document where that complaint was recorded through. Was it recorded through a hospital, a doctor's office, a consumer, and from their home, somebody that just went and bought the product over the shelf, or got it as a prescription and is using the product, and there is some kind of defect that they found with that product. You also want to include, record if a sample of that product was included when they send it back to you. A lot of times complaints are going to come in as phone calls, and we're going to ask them to send that product back. They can also come in as emails. They can also come in as someone sending the actual product back. So you want to record if a sample of that product, or document if a sample of that product has been included, and the quantity of the sample. Also, any details of the product complaint have to be documented. You want to put details as far as the packaging and any reference numbers to other batches or other products, and the dates, and then of course the total quantity of that product that you are receiving back. If there is an investigation, you want to have enough room on your form to record your investigation. You want to document who that was received by, and then who the investigation is performed by, and what are the actions taken. And then, of course, on your form, you would have a place for conclusion. Did you confirm that, yes, this was a legitimate complaint or a legitimate defect? In your investigation, was this complaint actually confirmed or not? And then, of course, have your signatures for the ones that were carrying out the investigation and approving it, and then of course a section for recommended corrective actions. Obviously, I think the form needs to be you need to have adequate space on your forms for this to occur. But this is just a sample of the information that you're going to need to record, and you want to put how you record and what information you are recording in your SOP, your complaint SOP. Now, recalls, we said, are typically going to result from either a complaint or an adverse event. Once you are receiving product back into your facility that has been recalled, you want to be sure you need to have SOPs on recalled product as well, and how that product is received back into your facility. So you want to have be sure that all of your recalled products are clearly labeled. They have to be stored separately from other product. They have to be stored securely until a decision is made as to dumping the product or reworking and redistributing the product. One thing we have to remember is that your decisions have to be made in a timely manner. Of course, that's going to depend too on the type of, if there was an adverse event reported, and what type of complaint, critical or major or other. So you want to have a timeline in your SOP for recalls as well. There's a couple of different types of recalls. There's your compulsory product recall. This is product is not recalled voluntarily by the manufacturer. So this is a type of recall where the product, the FDA regulatory body is requesting the manufacturer to recall the product. The manufacturer is not doing it willingly. Then there's, of course, the voluntary product recall, and this is, of course, where the manufacturer is recalling the product on their own or voluntarily due to some type, again, of adverse event or complaint that resulted in an adverse event. So you also have your classifications, just like you have your classifications for your complaints, you have classifications for recalls as well. Class 1, Class 2, and Class 3. Your Class 1 recalls are recalls where there's a reasonable probability that consumer using this product or being exposed to this product is going to cause a serious adverse health event, have a serious adverse health problem, or death. So this is something that's going to cause, potentially could cause serious health problems or death. So this would be similar to your complaints that are critical. Your Class 2 recalls, where it's going to be classified as Class 2 if there's a reasonable probability that using the product, being exposed to the product, may cause a medically reversible adverse health consequence, or the probability of a serious adverse health consequence is remote. So I think sometimes when we're reading these definitions, they may get a little wordy. The Class 2, it's either going to be an irreversible adverse health consequence or having a high probability that the adverse health event is serious, but that is unlikely. So having it being unlikely that the probability of a serious adverse health event is going to occur. Most of the time for Class 2, these adverse health events are going to be reversible. So if you have some type of reaction to it, it's going to be reversible and not affect your health seriously. But it can happen in very remote or very, it's unlikely to happen, or in very remote situations. As far as Class 3, a recall is considered to be a Class 3 recall if there's a reasonable probability that, of course, using or being exposed to the product is not likely to cause an adverse health consequence. So your Class 3 is going to be something that may cause it may be some type of event that has happened with the product, but it's not anything that's going to cause a serious adverse health consequence. It's something minor. For your Class 3, examples of these types of recalls as far as Class 1, things that are going to cause very, very serious adverse health problems or death would be something where you might find that there's high level of sulfites in the product. There may be a high level of heavy metals in the product. Also, we may find pathogens such as Salmonella, E. coli, or Clostridium that are these bacteria obviously are going to cause very, very serious adverse health events, and they could also cause death. As for your Class 2, the recalls that do cause adverse health events, but these are reversible, would be where you might find foreign objects that are going to pose a physical hazard with the product. There's also the chance of finding hepatitis A or Cryptosporidium in the product as well. As far as the Class 3, these are the recalls that we said are very minor. They're not likely to cause adverse health events. And it may be something for a Class 3 recall as simple as a bottle of pills containing 90 pills or capsules instead of 100. And so, of course, there would be a mislabeling on that product because the consumer is being told that there's 100 or 150 capsules in the bottle, and they come to find out there was only 90. So this would be a need for a recall, but it's not adversely affecting the consumer's health. There are time limits with the recalls, we said, and that's going to depend on the class. And of course, the class has to do with the severity. For class 1s, these recalls have to be done within 24 hours and up to 72 hours. And again, that's going to depend on the severity of the class 1. We said again that class 1 are very serious adverse events, and they can cause death to between 24 and 72 hours to recall these products from distribution. Class 2 product recalls, or you have up to a maximum of 10 days to get that product recalled out of distribution and off the shelves within the store or out of hospitals where it's being distributed, or pharmacies. And again, we said that class 2 are serious events, but they are typically reversible. The class 3, the very minor events, you have up to 30 days to get those products off the shelves or away from the consumers. That is a maximum of 30 days. There are requirements for recalls, and we did say, of course, you need a SOP for handling recalls, and also to handle the records of the recalls. You also have to, just like with complaints, you have to maintain all of your records that have to do with your recalls. There also has to be a designee appointed to execute these recalls, and of course, they have to have the appropriate staff. The designee has to be independent of sales and marketing, and of course, that is to prevent a conflict of interest. And of course, the recall must be initiated promptly and at any time. All competent authorities of countries where the product has been distributed, you are responsible as a manufacturer to inform these authorities promptly if the product is being recalled because it is defective. Any distribution records have to be readily available to the person responsible for the recalls, and of course, they have to contain enough information on the wholesalers and the directly supplied customers. So this, as part of your distribution SOPs, you need to be sure that you are recording addresses, contact persons, telephone numbers of where these products are going, the wholesalers and any supplied customers, so that you can be sure that if there is a recall, then you can contact these people promptly. The recalled product has to be stored separately in a secured location. So when we say secured, we're talking about in a locked location with limited access. And of course, until a decision is made, until an investigation is carried out, and there's a decision that is made whether to rework the product and put it back on the shelves or to destroy the product. The recall process has to be documented. You also have to write a final report, including a reconciliation between the delivered product and the recovered quantity. So you have to keep records of who has received your product with the accurate contact information. And know the quantities, obviously, that you have distributed. This all should be required information. It should be in a SOP, a distribution SOP, requirements SOP for your facility, so that you are recording the proper information. And then if you know that you distributed 10 lots to this particular manufacturer, you're going to need to reconcile that you received those back. Now, obviously, some of those could have been sold, but you're going to have records of reconciliation and know what you received back. Also, the effectiveness of the recall has to be evaluated periodically, and this can be done by performing a dummy recall. This is why you want to test your SOPs and make sure that they are adequate. You want to also have a detailed checklist that is designated by the manufacturer to recall the product. So be sure that that is part of your SOP as well. Now, there is a system for reporting all these adverse events. Anytime that we're receiving product complaints, they may have to do with reactions to the product, something happening due to damage of the product, or a mislabeling. These adverse events have to be reported. The FDA has a system for reporting the adverse events. We have to record it, document the information, investigate the situation, and then keep the appropriate records on these adverse events. But then we also, as manufacturers, have to report them to the FDA. So the FDA has a system, an FAERS system or a FAERS system. This is a database that contains adverse event reports. It contains medication error reports and also product quality complaints that result in adverse events that were submitted to the FDA. So you can go into this reporting system and find this information from the FDA, but you do have to report your adverse events here. The FDA uses the information. How do they use it? This reporting system, FAERS, is a useful tool for them because they're looking for safety concerns for anything that might be related to a marketed product. Okay. Also, it's useful because it's used as an evaluating the manufacturer's compliance to reporting regulations and also to responding to outside requests for information. So the FDA does use this to monitor the manufacturer. The reports that are in FAERS are evaluated periodically by clinical reviewers. These are typically from the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research, or CDER. They're also from CBER, the Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research. And they're doing this because they want to monitor the safety of products after the FDA has approved them. So this is why you're putting your information in this system. The FDA is closely monitoring this information for any types of safety issues with the products once they have been approved. If the FDA finds a safety concern in the system, then of course they're going to perform further evaluation. Based on the evaluation of the potential safety concerns, then the FDA, of course, is going to take regulatory actions because they want to improve the product safety. And, of course, it is a responsibility to protect the public's health. So this is another reason that you are reporting through the system. So what they would do is there is updating. They do have the responsibility to update the product's labeling information if they have found some type of adverse event or the possibility of this product causing some type of allergic reaction. It's not on the label as a caution or a side effect. Then they would have the manufacturer go back and update the labeling information. If they have seen adverse events and they feel that there should be restrictions for using this drug product, then they will implement that. They may also find that there's safety information or new safety information concerning the product that needs to be relayed to the public. Other things, and these are rare, they may actually remove the product from the market if they have found issues with the product that are a safety concern where you're having your adverse events are causing fatalities. They cannot find a reason, and there's not a corrective action that they have found. Then they will remove the product permanently from the shelf, and this could be where they institute the recall. They will relay the information to the manufacturer. So if the manufacturer is not voluntarily removing the product, then the FDA can request that the product be removed from the shelf, and it can be a permanent removal. So who can send reports to the system, this FAERS system? Healthcare professionals can send reports, consumers, and manufacturers. So you as a manufacturer have to send the reports into the system of any of your adverse events and any complaints that resulted in your adverse events. But also healthcare professionals, doctors, nurses, can also submit reports and go in and put reports into the system. They can file complaints and any type of adverse event that resulted from the product, and you as a consumer can do the same thing. The FDA does receive voluntary reports directly from healthcare professionals, not just doctors, but pharmacists, nurses, and others. They do also receive them straight from the consumers. A lot of times these people will go around the manufacturer and go straight to the FDA. The consumers could be patients, they could be family members, they might be lawyers where a family has had an adverse reaction, an adverse event occur because of a product and has sought legal advice. And so this would be the case where a lawyer would be contacting the FDA or resending the FDA report through the system. And there are, of course, other ways to do this. Healthcare professionals, consumers, may also report products to the manufacturer. And this is where we have to have systems in place to handle complaints and to handle adverse event reporting. You need an SOP for adverse event reporting and how that is handled as well. If the manufacturer, of course, receives a report from a healthcare professional or consumer, then you are required to send the report to the FDA as specified, of course, by the regulations, and you will find those in the GMPs. So all of these people can send reports into the system, but they can also send reports to the manufacturer. The lawyers or the consumers or physicians can contact the manufacturer, and then, of course, you have that responsibility to let the FDA know as well. There's also another way to report an adverse event or a medication error to the FDA, and this is through MedWatch. MedWatch is a website that provides information about voluntary and mandatory reporting. So if you as a consumer do not know how to report information, you can go to the MedWatch website and you will find the information that's needed to be able to report these adverse events. Another question is that can mandatory reporters submit adverse events electronically? And yes, of course we can. The FDA Adverse Event Reporting System, or the FAERS system, is there for electronic submissions. The website provides drug and therapeutic biological product manufacturers, distributors, packers of the product, and other parties that may have, or that are interested with the information to report electronically and to submit your information electronically. There's instructions on how to electronically submit post-marketing individual safety reports with or without attachments. So you just have to go into that website and do this electronically and submit all of your information with your reports, and then you can add attachments in support of your complaint or your adverse event. We did say that healthcare professionals, consumers, and manufacturers can all submit reports into the FRIR system. The FDA does receive voluntary reports from these people as well, and of course from other professionals and consumers. But as a manufacturer, you have to keep a record of your reports, and you have to report this to the FDA. And of course, this is specified in the regulations. There are requirements now for adverse event reporting, and there's 3 types of reports. There is a 15-day report of serious unlabeled events. There's a 15-day narrative increased frequency of serious labeled events, and then there's your periodic reports. The manufacturer or the applicant, of course, we said, is required to report the adverse event. Any person whose name appears on the label of a marketed drug as the manufacturer, as the packer, or as the distributor, then you have the reporting responsibilities. Now, it doesn't matter, and look at that, it's not just the manufacturer. If you are a packer of this product or you are a distributor of this product and your name appears on the label as manufacturer, packer, or distributor, then you have reporting responsibilities for adverse events. You would also need to have SOPs in place for doing this as well, handling adverse events and reporting them. Any individual or corporate entity that holds an approved new drug application, an NDA, or even an abbreviated new drug application, an ANDA, or an antibiotic application, you are also responsible for reporting adverse events. What do you have to report? All of the reports of spontaneous adverse events that are occurring in the United States, of course, are considered to be domestic reports. As far as foreign reports, literature and study reports, they have serious unlabeled events, and then, of course, the increased frequency of serious labeled events. So this is how they are classified. For your 15-day report, this is a serious unlabeled event. And we're talking about an unlabeled event. It's an event that was not on the label as something that could possibly happen. These must be reported to the FDA. You have to use an FDA Form 1639, and of course, as soon as possible, you need to report these, but you have to do it within 15 working days of the initial receipt of the information by the applicant. So if you have a report of an adverse event, something that was not known, something that was not addressed on the label of the product, then you have to fill out a Form 1639, and you have to get this reported within 15 days of receiving that complaint for the adverse event or knowledge of the adverse event. So you have 15 working days. Your 15-day narrative increased frequency report of serious labeled events, and this, of course, labeled events is going to be something that on the label or in your prescription packet that you get, it tells you the serious side effects. These you have to report. We know that these things can occur, so we're talking about the increased frequency. Obviously, this is occurring, and we have to monitor the frequency of these. You have to give a narrative, meaning you're giving a story, basically. You're telling what happened. You're giving a format of the event, and you want to do this as soon as possible. However, you do have 15 working days after determining that the significant increase in event exists. For each adverse event that's reported in a 15-day narrative increased frequency report, you still have to use the form, FDA Form 1639. And this form can be pulled off the FDA's website. They do have these forms to download on their website. And again, you're going to need to have SOPs in place for reporting these different types of labeled and unlabeled events that are serious, and you need to include that you have 15 days from the determining the events were frequent, increased in frequency, and that they were significant events, whether they were labeled or unlabeled. If there is a death that has been associated with an unlabeled event or even a labeled event, and the labeling doesn't specify that the event may be associated with a fatal outcome, then you have to submit a 15-day report on the FDA Form 1639. A lot of times we'll have information on the label that's going to say this is a significant event that could occur, and this is the result of the significant event. And if it's unlabeled, obviously we were not aware of it with the product and it caused a death, then you have to submit a 15-day report on the FDA 1639. If it was a labeled event, not specifying the death that was associated with a fatal outcome, you have to admit, and it did obviously have a fatal outcome, then you have to submit that report within 15 days, and it has to be done again on the FDA Form 1639. Each report that involves death is analyzed for an increased frequency, and there's two different ways to do that. There's what we call a one analysis, and this is where death reports are associated with a given labeled event. So if there's something that we have acknowledged on the label, the event should be combined with other serious reports of that particular event, and then you have to analyze it periodically. You're going to analyze it for at least quarterly for the first 3 years, because again, you're looking for the increased frequency in these events. So the first 3 years of marketing, you're going to analyze these reports for any types of deaths that were associated with this labeled event. And then, of course, after the first 3 years, you can analyze it annually for any type of increased frequency, because it is a new product, it is deaths were associated with the labeled event or other serious events, then you have to analyze your reports every 3 months, quarterly for the first 3 years of marketing that product. And then, of course, you can go annually. But again, you're looking for an increased frequency. And if you're getting adverse events reported on this, obviously you are seeing an increase in frequency, and then that has to be reported to the FDA within 15 days of finding out those events. There's another type of reporting called or analysis that is done called second analysis, and this has to do with unlabeled death reports from a product. It also has to do with labeled death reports and reports of death only. So they may not be associated with anything but the person, there was a death from this product. These are combined and analyzed, of course, again, for increased frequency. Now, the death-only reports are those adverse events that were reported with no other significant adverse event. So we know that while taking the product or using the product or being exposed to the product, a death occurred. There is no other type of adverse event that was reported with that. There's also your overdose reports, and these are reports of overdoses. They should be submitted only when the overdoses, of course, are associated with adverse events. The adverse event experiences are associated with the overdose, and they have to be reported as serious reactions. So if there, I mean, because sometimes, you know, we can take something or take too many of a product maybe, or too much of a product, and there's not anything that occurs because of that. But if there is a serious adverse event, then these have to be reported along with other serious reactions. If this event, of course, is unlabeled, you still have to submit a 15-day report on the FDA Form 1639. If the event is labeled, then of course you use the same form, FDA 1639. It should be submitted in the periodic report for spontaneous domestic cases, something that is labeled. There's also a lack of effects report, and this will be failure to produce the expected pharmacologic reaction. So if his medicine was given or the drug product was given and the pharmacologic action did not happen, it didn't, the appropriate response to the medication was not received, then that is a lack of effects report. All spontaneous domestic reports of the lack of effect, again, has to be reported on Form 1639. FDA Form 1639 is a large form, and there's areas from reporting all types, as you can see, of information. You do want to analyze these reports. You want to analyze them at least quarterly, again, for the first 3 years of marketing, and then, of course, analyze them annually, because, again, annually you're going to be looking for the increased frequency. And the same thing for your quarterly reports for the first 3 years. You want to make sure that this product is doing what it obviously is supposed to do, and you're looking for increased frequency and it not having the appropriate or the expected pharmacologic action. There may be other factors involved here. There may be a particular type of person, maybe things that people are doing that cause the lack of pharmacologic reaction. So you want to be very conscious of looking for the specifics in these increased events as you are monitoring this product and reporting this information on Form 1639. So how does the FDA respond to these adverse events? If they receive a serious adverse event report about a product, obviously they're going to contact the manufacturer, and of course they're going to ask to see your report that you have kept on file about that event. Sometimes the FDA is going to ask you for more information, and they're going to ask you for submission of a MedWatch form with the product label. The MedWatch form is, of course, the FDA's safety information and adverse reporting program. It's used to report these adverse events or sentinel events. It was founded in 1993. It was voluntary reporting. It allows information to be shared, of course, with the medical community and also with the public. And we did say that anyone can go in to this website and report information, just like they can go into the FREER system and report information. And this MedWatch has the instructions on reporting information that way as well concerning adverse events as well. On this MedWatch form, you'll have a description of the serious adverse event, and you also will have to write a description of the outcome. You want to name the specific product that was suspected of causing the adverse event. You want to be sure that you're identifying the contact information of the responsible party, whether it is the manufacturer, the packer, or the distributor. And remember, all of those are responsible for these adverse events. Identifiable initial report of the event, and you also want to identify, report the identity of the person injured. Now, you don't necessarily have to put the person's name, because that would be privacy, excuse me, violation, but you can put the initials only. So in order to summarize, we need to be sure that we understand that complaints may lead to defective product, which is going to could cause very serious adverse events that could be fatal. So we need to have SOPs in place for handling complaints. There has to be a designee with a support system to handle complaints, also to handle recalls as well. Any types of critical, the manufacturers are responsible for assuring, of course, that customers are not at risk. Critical defects, anything that can be life-threatening, of course, is that you find out about, that you receive a complaint about, is going to require immediate action, and it could be a recall. We talked about the 3 different classes of recalls. Anything that's life-threatening is going to be a class 1, and you're going to need to get that product off the shelf within 24 to 72 hours. There's also major defects that put customers at risk that are not life-threatening. The critical defects are going to be life-threatening. The major ones are not, of course, and then the others are very minor. Recalls have to be handled positively and carefully reviewed to be effective. You have to monitor these recalls and monitor your product, as we said, for any types of increased frequencies in these events that are being reported, and any time that you need to recall that product because of a serious, a critical, a major defect, or any type of serious labeled or unlabeled event. Adverse event.